Circle episode 9 for the second season. I'm your host, the Bleached Demon, and I am joined, as always, and eternally, apparently, by Total Blackout Painting, also known as Fat Dave.
Hello. So today we are talking about the French Romantic painter, Eugène Delacroix. I gotta affect that gay French accent for a lot of this.
Oh, mon Dieu.
Yeah, we're talking about Eugène Delacroix and the French Romantic movement and the a lot of stuff. He had a really interesting life and lived through a lot of upheaval within the French history. So let's go ahead and get started here. We'll talk about the timeline.
Yes, as we must, because that is truly one of the more interesting aspects of going through this is figuring out how they all fit. And actually, yes, I am killing time because I need to bring it up myself.
I take the time to make these charts, so I might as well talk about them.
Yes, they are helpful. It's great visualization, especially when we have artists that maybe people are kind of familiar with conceptually, but they don't know him, the artist directly.
Right. Well, and this one in particular, I think, is interesting because it highlights, it shows all four phases of all four French revolutions, the three of which that occurred during his lifetime. His life spans the rise and fall of Napoleon, the July Revolution, where the Bourbon monarchy was unseated, and the subsequent revolution of 1848, which led to the proclamation of the Second Republic. So I'll read my blurb here. Delacroix stands as a major turning point in art history, emerging during the waning of Neoclassicism, but before the rise of realism, Impressionism, and modern painting. He was one of the central figures of French Romanticism, helping to shift painting away from the classical restraint and towards color, movement, and emotional intensity. With the tremendous overlap of Neoclassicism and Romanticism, he is often contrasted with Auguste Dominique Ingres, one of the leading French neoclassical painters at the time, who we discussed prior to stream. We're going to talk about next season.
Yep.
Delacroix drew inspiration from many Baroque artists, particularly Peter Paul Rubens and other painters of the Venetian Renaissance. And he represents the more sensual and painterly and expressive side of 19th century French art, and serves as an important bridge between the academic traditions and austerity of the late 18th century to the freer artistic developments that followed in the 19th century. So he's kind of the forefather of modern painting. So with that, we'll jump into the biography here. Eugène Delacroix is... Oh shit. Of course I didn't switch my scene to the fucking timeline here. So there's the timeline. So again, I'll point out, we can see on the timeline the French Revolution begins, the first one in 1789, and then Napoleon is crowned emperor in the early 19th century. And then July Revolution, which is where the Bourbon monarchy was unseated, and then the Revolution of 1848, where Charles X was unseated, and it was, where they moved back to the Second Republic. Anyhow. So now we'll jump to the biography. This distinguished looking gentleman right here, which this is a cool painting.
Yeah.
So Eugène Delacroix was born in 1798, on April 2nd, 1798 at Charaton Saint Maurice near Paris. He entered a family that was socially and politically well connected. his mother, Victoria Orbin, who came from the Orbin-Reisner lineage, associated with luxury furniture made for the French court, and his legal father was Charles Francois Delacroix. Charles Francois
Francois.
Delacroix.
There
Francois,
we
yeah. Who was a senior government official, served in prominent state roles, including the ambassador to Holland and later as the prefect of Bordeaux. He was the youngest of three much older siblings. His oldest brother, Charles Henri Delacroix, went on to become a general in Napoleon's army. And his sister, Henrietta Delacroix, also known as Henrietta de Verniac, this lady here married the diplomat Raymond de Verniac Saint Maur. And this painting is interesting. This is painted by Jacques-Louis David. This is painting Portrait of Madame de Verniac from 1799. So crossover from a few episodes ago. And there's another brother, his youngest brother, or his oldest, his closest brother was Henri Delacroix, was born before Eugene and was later killed in 1807 at the Battle of Friedland. And this is an image from Horace Vernet, the Napoleon at the Battle of Friedland, painted in 1835.
So that was War of the Second Coalition, I think. And this happened in Prussia. Sorry,
go.
I'm just fascinated by Napoleonic history, and this was one of those. It was enough of a defeat of, I think it was the Russian forces. This is where he started his campaign into Russia conceptually, realizing that the Russians were a weaker military than he'd realized. So, yeah. It's part of his Prussian campaign, and that's where you'll get. There's a very famous painting called Vive l'Empereur by Edouard de Taille.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of those famous cavalry charge paintings. But anyway, that's
okay.
a whole other, whole different rabbit hole we could go down sometime when we do another artist.
So his father died in 1805 when he was still a boy, and his mother died in 1814, leaving him effectively an orphaned as a teenager. And that instability is important. It's important for understanding the emotional and social context of his youth. He did not come into adulthood through a calm, continuous domestic life, but through a household shaped by bereavement and elite connections and shifting guardianship as he was moved from household to household. And as a fun side note, many biographies repeat the theory that Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Perignon may have been his actual biological father rather than Francois Delacroix. But Britannica notes this is just a theory and it's not an established fact. And about Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Perignon, he was a French secularized clergyman, statesman, and leading diplomat. After studying theology, he became the Argent General of the clergy in 1780. And in 1789, just before the French Revolution, he became a bishop of Autun. He worked at the highest levels of successive French governments, most commonly as a foreign minister in some diplomatic capacity.
Right. Is that... There's a phrase, and it's something like, the grand old man like Talleyrand. And I think that is who this is in reference to.
I believe so. He's another towering figure in the French politics at the time that outlasted many rulers, but was always kind of this elder statesman, kind kind of like a member of the swamp in a way, you could say.
Very much so, yes.
to
I
to
mean,
put it in
I
a
would always call Versailles a swamp, but that's just me.
I fittingly call it a swamp, but moving on to his training and education, and this is a self-portrait that he did of himself.
Hmm,
Delacroix, he began his formal artistic training in Paris in the mid 1850 or 1810s, entering the studio of Pierre Narcisse Guérin around 1815. Guérin was a respected history painter tied to the academic tradition, um, and not an anti-academic. And it began inside, or his not anti-academic. His training began inside the established French system. Guérin encouraged study of nature rather than relying just solely on antique models, and his training gave him discipline and understanding of figure study and access to the world of large-scale history paintings. But despite their efforts it didn't lock him into the neoclassical style.
interesting.
So while in the studio, he met Theodore Garicol, who we talked about last week briefly as a compatriot of Caspar David Friedrich.
Yep.
Um, he showed him he showed him that a modern French painter could take on dramatic contemporary and literary subject matter with emotional violence and formal ambition. And this is a lesson that Delacroix would pursue in his own way in many of his works. So the Met describes him as an artist who balanced reverence for the past with innovation, and standard Delacroix scholarship consistently points to his admiration for Rubens and the Venetians and other older masters. And his formation was literary as well. He was drawn to Dante, um, Dante Alighieri, and then
Yeah, the
Shakespeare, which
Divine Comedy.
this is it surprises me that this is the first time Shakespeare's come up in the entire time that we've been doing this series.
You
But
know,
this is
that is kind of mind blowing, especially considering how he created the word art.
yeah, how he was contemporary to so many of the artists that we've talked about. So also
Interesting.
he was shaped by Goethe, and also Lord Byron was um another literary figure that he was very fond of. And this literary imagination helped distinguish him from a more narrowly classical model of training. He was not preparing simply to reproduce antique order. He was building a language for passion, instability, tragedy, and psychological force. But despite his exposure and training, he was very self directed. And he absorbed the lessons of his peers and studies and converted them into his own style. So, on that note, we'll move into, especially talking about Dante, we'll move into the first painting we're going to talk about. And this is the Barque of Dante. This was painted in 1822. It's an oil on canvas, and it measures 74.4 inches by 95.1 inches, or 789 by 241.5 centimeters, and it currently resides in the Louvre. This was first exhibited at the Salon, the Paris Salon, in 1822, and it served as Delacroix's public breakthrough and was later purchased by the state of France for 2,000 francs, which is around $10,000 to $12,000 in today's dollars. The scene depicts Dante and visual crossing the infernal waters near the city of Dis and is based on Canto 8 of Dante's Inferno. And that briefly states, but the Canto 8 talks about Pelagius, Pelagius, who is the man in blue here. He grudgingly ferries Virgil and Dante across the Styx. On their way, they see Filippo Ardenti, who tries to get on the boat, which you can see in the background here.
Glowing red eyes.
Yeah, with red eyes. They arrive at the great walled city of Dis, and the river Styx separate the fifth circle the fifth circle of the wrathful into lower hell. So the river is full of the damned who crowd the boat and claw at its sides as they're ferried through. And this is widely accepted as one of the landmark works of the rise of French Romanticism. Its popularity led to because it was such a huge and monumental piece, and shift from the neoclassical style at the time, that it was really popular. It made it quite a splash at the time. The composition, of course, shows the upright passengers on the boat as the boatmen they're crowded in a violent and unstable setting. The boat cuts through the smoky landscape, and the figures reflect Delacroix's neoclassicist training and its kind of organized grouping and muscularity, but the force and the turbulence and the color is really what pushes it towards Romanticism. Particularly the background is not as neat and defined, and the whole composition, despite it being all the characters being very neat and tidy, it doesn't have that same kind of sterile realism that you saw in works like The Oath of the Herati or Socrates and Drinking the Poison. There's a lot more action and emotion here. And one of the things that was really notable about this painting is the water droplets on the bodies. And I'll zoom in a bit.
That's a really fascinating technical detail.
Yeah.
Because although they also look like guppy fry at the same time. Completely sidetracked. But that's a really cool way of doing the detail work on these characters. And even just the breaking of the water is really well done. Whether it's the ship or the bodies dragged through.
Yeah, and that's all I have. I would say it highlights his technical use of color and the choice of his ability to use color in a way that portrays kind of a realistic looking scene, and a technically tight scene. So, and you were saying, sorry.
No. I'm just looking at the detail at the bow the boat cutting through the water, things like that. Even against the bodies. So it shows he understands fluid motion a lot better than you would expect in theory for this time period. But then these were the masters. So I wonder how much time he spent looking at water forming a wake around an object.
Yeah. And the waves and the stuff. He does a really good job of capturing it with, kind of the greenish glass-like water. And even the partially submerged bodies with the water going on top of them does a really good job of. The color does a really good job of portraying the submersion and all that stuff.
Yeah, because I'm hesitant to zoom in on some of these parts due to YouTube, but you see the water kind of moving over the thighs of several of these figures, and it's the color gradient you're talking about. That's such a amazing detail, one that we see, but to capture that for painting is really the crux of the issue to me. That's something that it's easy to overlook.
Yeah,
it's a technical detail that's very easy to overlook.
Right. And the towering walls of the city of Dis in the background, shrouded in smoke, I think is another really cool detail. Um,
Mhm.
that gives it kind of that more romantic flair of the emotionality of it. So, um, in contrast to the neoclassicism, where it has the calm moral clarity, like with the Oath of the Herati, this image really immerses the viewer in fear and instability and the suffering and violent movement of the scene. Um, you know, Dante steadies himself against Virgil as the boatman is really putting seems like he's putting his back into steering the steering the ferry as these people try to clamber aboard.
And again, that's a very good use of musculature in motion.
Yeah,
Because we've seen that, but it's almost like the study of someone's back in this particular painting.
right. Yeah, he does a phenomenal job of capturing like the realism of the musculature of the bodies. Even though I don't think people floating in the river Styx would be this actually muscular. They would probably be more emaciated, but at the time, he was just capturing the idealized form.
Yes, yes. Well, I mean, you have to make them look threatening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So we'll move on to his early career here. So this is another picture of Delacroix. His early career begins with a remarkably fast transition from student to public figure. And his debut at the Paris Salon of 1822 with the Barque of Dante was, as we previously discussed, one of the landmarks of the French Romantic painting. And it established him not as a minor newcomer, but as a young artist ready and capable of an ambitious literary subject matter. It also set an important pattern for the rest of his career as it attracted both strong support and strong resistance to his art. He had many people who loved his art. He had many people that, of course, did not like his art because it was such a departure from the neoclassicist style. And he was not an outsider working against the system. He entered public life through the Salon itself, which was the central institution of art in France. And even though his art often unsettled viewers, whose views were shaped by neoclassicism, he was not simply rejecting the academic world from the margins, but forcing a new romantic possibility into the center of French high art. So between 1824 and 1825, he widened his artistic horizons. And in 1825, he visited England, where he encountered such as uh, Thomas Lawrence, who painted this work. And this is Satan summoning his legions.
Oh, that
Uh,
that looks like somebody working in Congress these days.
yeah, right. No, you could see that person holding a gavel. Um, and also Richard
Abigail,
Parks
is that you?
Bonington. Right. That's Nancy. Um, Richard Parks Bonington, who painted this painting, and this is a fish market near Bologna. This was painted in 1824.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
English painting, along with the larger experience of English visual culture, left an impression on him, especially in matters of color and handling. And his next major advance came with with the scenes from the massacre at Chios in 1824, which pushed him further into prominence. And we'll jump over and talk about that painting now.
All right.
So this was painted in 1824, and it's an oil on canvas, and it measures 164 inches by 139 inches, or 419 centimeters by 354 centimeters. And it's currently in the Louvre. A lot of his works are in the Louvre. The full title is Scenes from the Massacre at Chios, Greek Families Awaiting Death or Slavery. And this was in response to the Chios massacre in 1822 during the Greek War for Independence from the Ottomans.
Oh, cool.
So
That's a bit of history that we don't usually get covered. So this is rather exciting.
yeah, it's an interesting. The story of this is actually really interesting. So the Chios massacre was a catastrophe that resulted in the death, enslavement, and flight of about 4/5 of the total population of Greeks on the island of Chios by Ottoman troops during the Greek War for Independence in 1822. And it's estimated that up to 100,000 people were killed or enslaved during the massacre, while
Wow.
up to 20,000 escaped as refugees. Greeks from the neighboring islands had arrived at Chios and encouraged the Chiotes, the native inhabitants of the island, to join their revolt. And in response, the Ottoman troops landed on the island and killed thousands of people. The massacre of Christians provoked outrage across the Western world and led to increasing support for the Greek cause worldwide, um, further widening the rift between the Ottomans and the Western world, and also
And also,
highlighting. Oh, go ahead.
oh, go ahead. No, I was going to say, it also is kind of that first chink in the Ottoman armor. Because yes, they'd been defeated before, but the eventual Greek independence, which was about a 8-year process, really damaged the Ottoman military internally and showed that they could be defeated, and that led to subsequent decline and defeat and eventual dissolution after the World War.
Yeah, and good, because fuck those guys. They were assholes, and they were
Yeah,
constant.
they should have been dealt with sooner.
Right? I mean, I can't think of how many paintings we've talked about that have, like, all the way back to Hieronymus Bosch. There were from the late 15th century, um the Ottomans and the Ottomans were seen as an oppressive force by the people of Europe, which they very much were. They were constantly attacking and burning cities and destroying stuff. They attacked the Christian world on a pretty regular basis, and the Russian as well. As we saw with Repin's, the reply of the Zaporozhian Cossacks.
Mm-hmm.
The Ottomans just were a menace to the world for a really long time.
Yes, and well, you even have later than this, the Balkan, not the Balkan Wars. That's much later. The Charge of the Light Brigade, the
Mhm.
Siege of Sevastopol. Sorry, my brain has just lost that war.
Yeah.
I'll figure it out, or LGM, or someone will remind me.
Yeah. And I don't know that much about it, so I can't speak to it. But I didn't study a lot about it for this. I just studied the painting and some of the history. So anyhow, this was painted for the Paris Salon of 1824. So only 2 years after the massacre actually happened. And it continued Delacroix's assertion of French Romanticism, and again was met with mixed reactions. The painting took a recent political atrocity and turned it into a large history painting centered on civilian suffering and despair. And again, a break from the neoclassical focus on heroism and moral stability. And the painting, as we can see, it shows a group of exhausted, wounded, and dying Greeks, with captives and destruction in the background. Of course, we can see the smoke rising in the background, and all these people here battling in the background. And the work showed that modern political violence could be treated as a subject worthy of a grand manner. And it really signaled a shift in French painting towards emotional extremity. And it opened the door to a new kind of history painting built around human pathos rather than classical composition.
Just looking at like the dead woman with the infant, down in the bottom right corner.
Yeah.
I mean, if she's not dead, I don't know how else. But to have, you know, those and a few other figures of people who are clearly dead and dying is very powerful in this painting, because it's something, you know, like Holofernes for the 30th time doesn't compare to this because of just the visceral nature of the entire painting.
Right. And it does a great job of showing the kind of the cost of war. You know, it's displaying these poor people who, without a heroic subject, without a heroic figure, these people are just downtrodden and oppressed. You know, the dead mother with the baby trying to suckle at her teat is a tragic scene. Of course, over here you see on the left, you'll see another pale-faced person who is likely another dead person or dead or dying person. The wounded man in the middle is bleeding out of a wound in his side. People are embracing, hoping for relief, but receiving none, as the the Ottoman Turk kind of charges over them with a horse, dragging someone behind him.
And he's also drawing his saber, showing
Yeah,
that he's ready to commit more atrocities.
right. And the scene in the very background here is interesting because it shows, zoom in on that, right behind the horse, and this is a big painting, so it takes a second to load. There we go. You can make out that these guys have guns, and they are shooting these women, women and harmless peasants. You know, the military has come in and they're just straight up massacring people, in a really powerfully charged scene. So it was again a shift in the world, because it doesn't have there's no heroic figures, there's nobody standing up and fighting back. It just shows the humanity of the massacre that occurred during their time. And with that, we'll move on to the actual next painting we're going to talk about here, which is the Death of Sardanapalus. And this was painted in 1826, between 1826 and 1828. It's oil on canvas. It measures 154 by 95 inches, or 392 by 796 centimeters. And again, currently in the Louvre. And this was another major Salon painting. And it's based on the legend of Sardanapalus, the last king of Assyria, and was inspired by Lord Byron's 1821 play, Sardanapalus. So a little background on that is Sardanapalus is a historical tragedy by Lord Byron, set in ancient Nineveh, recounting the fall of the Assyrian monarchy and its supposed last king. Draws its story mainly from the historical library of Diodorus Siculus and from William Mitford's History of Greece. And Byron wrote the play during a stay in Ravenna and dedicated it to Goethe. And more background on Sardanapalus, a little bit of history on him is he exceeded all previous rulers in sloth and luxury. He spent his whole life in self-indulgence. He dressed in women's clothes and wore makeup. He had many concubines, both male and female. And he wrote his own epitaph, which stated that physical gratification is the only purpose in life. Which is kind of emblematic of a late stage empire ruler, right? Like,
very much so.
They fall he's been handed all this wealth and opulence, and he just falls into decadence as a result of it. So, yeah, exactly. So, according to the legend, after defeat by the rebels, his forces were defeated by the rebels. He orders the destruction of his treasures, servants, and concubines before his own death. So they're getting ready to kill him, and he's like, fuck it, I'm taking everything and everybody else with me. And so he orders all of his male and female concubines to be murdered, all of his treasures destroyed, because he'd rather see it destroyed than have it fall into enemy hands. So Britannica describes this as one of Delacroix's chief masterpieces, calling it a violent and voluptuous Byronic subject. And the Met places it among the works that polarized the public during the Salon of 1827 and exemplified early Romanticism's break from the stricter neoclassical styles. The painting is dominated by a vast red bed set at a plunging diagonal, with Sardanapalus, reclining above the carnage in detached stillness, while the scene below erupts in murder, panic, nudity, luxury, and collapse. The central figure of the painting he's definitely not a moral hero. Instead, he appears almost emotionally withdrawn as destruction unfolds around him, which makes the work feel kind of more cool and decadent. And this is seen as Delacroix at his most excessive and controversial, turning a literary / legendary subject into a huge manifesto of romantic color, violence, and anti-classical intensity.
Well, it's also, so it was 1828, and in the end of 18th, or I think it's July 1830s. My correction. That's where the end of the Bourbon Restoration happened. That's where the Revolution painting came from.
Yeah.
Although that's referencing the earlier revolution. So I just have to wonder if this isn't some kind of inside baseball insights that he had to the goings on of the Charles the 10th, I think.
Yeah, or Charles the 10th. Yep.
So, yeah, that seems almost emblematic, or maybe even prophetic about the things that were going to be happening.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that, I mean, and not to sound like douchey, but a lot of artists kind of foresee stuff like that. They foresee political turmoil, they see tragedy as it's happening, and so, or as it's developing, and they form their art around that, because it becomes it comes from a more emotional place than an analytical place. And so the emotion of revolution and decay follows comes along a little bit before the actual destruction. Of course, that's when revolutions happen. And so I think that Byron's play was a subtle critique of the monarchy at the time that was starting to kind of fall into decadence. And then this was, of course, a painting about the play, which was kind of a commentary on the society at the time, of the decadence of the society, which the decadence of the monarchy is what led to the very first French Revolution. And they just can't help themselves. They're French. What are you going to say?
Exactly.
So it's an incredibly, like, there's a lot of motion, there's a lot of action, and there's a wide range of emotion in this painting. Of course, because the guy's reclining, just detached, while, naked women are being murdered, even a horse.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And it's not just like, because you can see there's a woman kind of back here killing somebody too, while the city burns in the background.
There's something about this that reminds me a bit of Bosch. Just, like I'm just waiting for like butt music or some weird bird devil thing to show up in the background. But
Right?
it's that level of chaos and action and the color palette too,
Yeah.
which is fascinating.
Yeah, and it does show how Delacroix adopted the Renaissance style more than the classical style for his painting and his color palettes and stuff. So just to move things along, and since you mentioned it, in the 1830 painting, we're gonna jump over to that one, which is Liberty Leading the People, which is perhaps, and not even perhaps, this is 100% Delacroix's most famous painting and one of the most famous paintings of the French Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
So it was painted in 1830, oil on canvas. It measures 102.4 by 128 inches or 260 by 325 centimeters. And again, resides in the Louvre. And it was painted in response to the July Revolution of 1830. And I got a little blurb about that. So the July Revolution was the second French Revolution after the first that occurred in between 1789 to 99. And this was, again, led to the overthrow of Charles X, the French Bourbon monarch, and the ascent of his cousin, Louis Philippe, the Duke of Orleans. The 1830 revolution marked a shift from that point on as the constitutional monarchy was restored with the July monarchy. The transition of power from the House of Bourbon to its cadet branch, the House of Orleans, and the replacement of the principle of hereditary right by that of popular sovereignty. And supporters of the Bourbons would be called legitimists, and supporters of Louis Philippe were known as the Orleanists. And in addition, there continued to be Bonapartists supporting the return of Napoleon's heirs during that time as well.
Yep.
The French government actually bought this painting in 1831 for 3,000 francs, which is roughly $23,000 in today's money, with the intention of displaying it in the throne room of the Palais du Luxembourg. Though that plan was abandoned because the image was judged as politically inflammatory, which is like a no shit. And the painting centers on Liberty as a personified female figure wearing a Phrygian cap, carrying the French tricolor in one hand and a bayoneted musket in the other as she strides over the fallen people. Delacroix gathers figures from different social classes, including bourgeois in the top hat and a worker and the famous pistol-wielding Kip Boy, which creates a cross-class revolutionary image meant to show that it was not just, a workers' rebellion. This was a rebellion, a popular revolt of the people, of all people, against the oppression of the monarchy. The composition is built as a forward surge. Bodies and debris form a rough pyramid beneath Lady Liberty, whose raised flag becomes the visual climax. And the painting feels immediate and chaotic, but it also is a highly structured, balancing the smoke and the corpses and the weapons and Notre Dame in the background to give revolutionary violence a kind of mythic national scale. And again, the Delacroix's most iconic painting, transforming the July Revolution into a mythic image of liberty, nation, and popular struggle.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, you even see it in some, occasional World War I propaganda art.
Yeah,
because Lady Liberty here becomes basically, I believe it's Marianne, which was the personification of France that was during the later part of the 19th and into the early 20th century.
Yeah, it's an incredibly famous image and a really powerful one too, and I believe a great way to capture the revolutionary spirit of the people at the time.
Indeed.
So to keep the pace moving here, we'll jump into the next one. So this is Charles X, painted by Thomas Lawrence in 1825, the guy who got the king who got overthrown in that revolution. So after his early Salon breakthroughs, Delacroix's mature career increasingly moved beyond controversial easel paintings into the world of major public commissions, where he began one of the leading monument became one of the leading monumental decorators of 19th century France.
Hmm.
In 1823 or 32, he traveled through Morocco as part of the diplomatic mission of the Comte de Mornay. This guy
Comte
who
de
is
Monet.
Comte de Mornay, yeah, that's what it is. Um, Following the conquest of Morocco by France. And the journey gave him a vast body of sketches and visual memories that expanded his sense of costume, gesture, atmosphere, and color. And it remained one of the defining sources of his later works. He went not primarily to study art, but to escape from the civilization of Paris in hopes of seeing some of a more primitive culture. And while in Algiers, he was able to covertly observe daily life. And based on his sketches, he painted the women of Algiers in their apartment in 1834. And his first major decorative commissions ran from 1833 to 1836 at the Palais Bourbon and the Palais du Luxembourg, like I spoke about earlier, and also at the Louvre. But I don't have a picture of that place because we all know what it fucking looks like, and it's an eyesore now.
Yeah.
Later followed by smaller commissions for churches around Paris. In 1838, he exhibited Medea about to kill her children, which was it created a sensation at the Salon. And this is a scene from Greek mythology that depicts Medea clutching her children, uh, dagger drawn to slay them in vengeance for her abandonment by Jason.
And also, the I can't remember the black actor's name, but the grandmother character that he plays. It's like, oh,
Medea
that's
Tyler
Medea.
Perry.
Hmm? Yeah, there we go.
That's Tyler Perry. Um,
Hmm.
it's the Netflix version of Tyler Perry's Medea. Um, and then in 1831, he painted Jewish Wedding in Morocco based on sketches which were exhibited. And this was exhibited at the Paris Salon in 1841. So in 1833, he met artist Marie Elizabeth Blaveau Boulanger at a ball, and later known as Madame Cave. She was a painter, teacher, and a lifelong friend of Delacroix, and she belonged to the artistic world around him in the 1830s and after. The autistic and
Are you sure
artistic,
it's not the
yeah.
autistic world? Yeah.
From 1837 to nearly 1850, he painted in the Palais Bourbon, and at the library at the Palais du Luxembourg. And in 1843, he decorated the Church of Saint Denis du Saint Sacrament with a large Pieta. And from 1848 to 1850, he painted the ceiling in the Galerie de Apollon of the Louvre, which has since been changed. During the 1840s, he sustained work on major decorative programs. After his earlier success at the Palais Bourbon, he continued to build his reputation through public commissions. And this confirmed that the French establishment had now regarded him as one of its leading monumental painters. So
Hmm.
at the same time, his health became more of a factor, and he suffered from an increasingly fragile constitution. In addition to his home in Paris from 1844, he also lived in a small cottage in Champrosay, where he found respite in the countryside. From 1834 until his death, he was faithfully cared for by his housekeeper, Jean-Marie Legueux, who zealously guarded his privacy and whose devotion prolonged his life and his ability to continue working into his later years.
Hmm. That's kind of
And
a really cool portrait of her with that bit of background.
yeah, yeah, it's the highest res image I could find of her, and it's a picture of a picture, a picture of a painting with the
Yeah.
frame. With that, we will jump over to our last work. This is Jacob wrestling with an angel. This is painted between 1859 and 1861, and it's oil on wax and plaster, and it resides in the Chapel of the Holy Angels in the Church of Saint Sulpice in Paris, where it was originally painted. The decoration of the chapel occupied him through a large portion of his late career, and he originally received the commission in 1849 and worked on on the chapel until 1861. And this scene is from Genesis 20:32, Genesis chapter 32, verse 22 through 32, with Jacob and the angel locked in a tense bodily struggle set within a broad landscape. And I can read that here. And he arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of Jabbok. He took them and sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now, when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What's your name?" He said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God struggled with God and with men, and have prevailed." And then Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." And he said, "Why is it that you ask about my name?" And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel. For what I have seen, God face to face, and my life is preserved. Just as he crossed over the Peniel, the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip. Therefore, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the muscle of that shank, which is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the muscle that shrank. So there we go. So unlike the overloaded chaos of some of Delacroix's early masterpiece, this mural feels more concentrated. The energy is still intense, but it is more controlled and more architectural and more spiritually focused. The wrestling motif becomes not just an action scene, but a sustained image of resistance, trial, and endurance. And this was Delacroix's great late religious masterpiece, turning a biblical struggle into a monumental image of spiritual conflict, endurance, and transformation. It's a man contending with fate, God, and inner transformation. It is the transcendent struggle between humanity and destiny, which is what that scene is meant to represent.
That is such a neat piece.
Yeah, and it's huge.
And it almost looks like he's kind of transitioning styles too a little bit.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, it's later in his life. Like many artists we see later in life, the brushstrokes they do get a little more erratic, more kind of more passionate in a way, right? As he knows how to capture the light and do everything. His background strokes really on the trees and stuff like that are really more reminiscent of something. They're more reminiscent of an impressionist style, something similar to Van Gogh. And you can see where those guys draw their inspiration from this.
Indeed.
And again, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was say this was a huge mural piece. It's I didn't put the proportions down here, but it's gigantic. It's like 15 feet or something like that. just a tremendous piece. So we'll move on to his later years here. I don't know if we're going to get to we might not get to the very last slide, but we'll get through this one.
All right.
So his final his later years, and I think this portrait is from 1857. So his final years were marked by a combination of high artistic authority and declining health. By the 1850s, he was no longer simply the bold young romantic who had shocked the Salon, but one of the most important painters in France, admired for both his easel paintings and his monumental decorative pieces like the previously shown ones. The demands of the large decorative works, especially in public buildings, took a toll on him. Long hours on scaffolding and drafty interiors damaged his health. Even so, he continued pushing forward towards major late achievements rather than retreating from ambitious work. His crowning project for his final phase was the aforementioned Chapel of the Holy Angels, with the cycle that included Jacob wrestling with the angel and also Saint Michael slaying the dragon, or Saint Michael overcoming the devil.
Mm-hmm.
And the expulsion of Heliodorus from the temple, which you can see an angel picking people out there. So in August 13 in 1863, he passed away at the age of 65 in Paris. 9,140 works were attributed to Delacroix, including 853 paintings, 1,525 pastels and watercolors, 6,629 drawings, 109 lithographs, and over 60 sketchbooks, alongside journals, which have become some of the most important artists' writings of the 19th century.
Wow.
And it left him as one of the towering figures of French Romanticism and a major influence on modern art. And he's one of the...
Man was prolific.
He was. And he was very much a bridge between kind of the 18th century classical art to the more modern world of art. And his life traces the arc of one of the great turning point figures of 19th century art. His use of color and brushwork were so highly influential on both Impressionist and Post-Expressionist paintings. The Met says that his work set into motion a cascade of innovations that changed the course of art. And the National Gallery says that his paintings, writings, and self-fashioning helped shape the development of modern painting. His legacy runs through color and expressive brushwork and artistic freedom, and he was explicitly admired by Van Gogh, and this is Cezanne here. This image here is Cezanne. By Van Gogh, Cezanne, your favorite Picasso, and broader, more modern circles that included Manet and Gauguin, Matisse, Renoir, and Kandinsky. They all counted him, spoke explicitly of him as an inspiration or an influence on their work. So he is really a towering giant of the French, not just the French, but the modern art. He led to a lot of the modern artists we have today. His use of color and expression really shaped the face of painting to come. So truly one of the most amazing, or I guess one of the most prominent and popular artists that we've talked to up to this point.
Yeah, I'm awed with a lot of his painting, especially not just the Jacob wrestling the angel, I was about to say, but the massacre of Chios.
Yeah.
That's just amazing detail.
Yeah.
Amazing detail.
And it really shows his ability to tackle controversial subjects and to you know, boldly paint a controversial subject in a way that portrays it in a humanizing way. So with that, we're at our hour.
Indeed.
And that was Eugène Delacroix. And next week, I'm going to try, we may have a special guest. We're going to be talking about Emanuel Leutz, who was the man who painted Washington crossing the Delaware, a German romantic painter and history painter that has some really truly inspirational works. So with that, I've been Fat Dave from Total Blackout Painting. Thank you for joining me, Bleach.
Always a joy, and yeah, go out and reclaim your art, damn it.
Yeah, absolutely. Love your art, love your people, and we'll see you next time, folks.
Cheers.